Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. In my social media groups, this video has been circulating and has been well received. I think one of the problems in Africa is that we respond to what we want to hear and somehow selectively black out what we ought to hear. Here, Mutambara is talking about the United States of Africa, an idea that is appealed to many Africans. We genuinely believe that is the panacea to all this continent's problems. I don't think so. Let's just listen to the video.
Come on, you foolish African. How dare you? 70 years of independence, and you are buying petrol, and that you produce petroleum. If you have the economies of scale, we'll be able to beneficiate and produce diesel, produce oil, petrol, iron and steel class, and so on. Why we need to do this? The major argument given against beneficiaries is that we don't have the critical mass. We don't have the market. We don't have the technology. We don't have the money. When you pull our resources together, the money will be there and we'll be able to, the market will be there. You can then talk to China, not as South Africa, but as SADC, as the FTA area. Why am I saying this? Look at those economies. China, 1.3 billion people, GDP $11 trillion. That's an economy. India, 1.2 billion people, GDP $2.5 trillion. That's an economy. The US, 3.5 million people, GDP $19 trillion. Shame on you, Malawi, shame on you, Zimbabwe. You are not an economy. You are a little village. South Africa, you are not a brick. Unless you go to the BRICS as SADC, as COMESA, as the FTA, you don't belong to the BRICS. Those are the numbers. Look at our potential as Africans. The African Continental Free Trade Area, 1.3 billion Africans, GDP $2.3 trillion. Now we are discussing. Can you imagine if we had to go and say, here I come, Madam China, here I come, Madam India, I'm the African. I speak on behalf of 1.3 billion Africans. I have a GDP of $2.3 trillion. Can we talk? They will talk to you, not out of love, out of economics.
Well, that's really sweet. But it must be said, very naive. Arthur Mutambara should know, for instance, that Zimbabwe's leader is the chairman of SADC. Since August last year. Please tell us how many mega business deals President Emerson Mnangagwa of Zimbabwe signed on behalf of SADC in the 6 months he has been chairman of SADC. Zero. When Mnangagwa took over and became the president of Zimbabwe, following the 2017 military coup. He pronounced to the rest of the world, Zimbabwe is open for business. And he genuinely believed that this would be followed by a flood of investors. We all know that not even a trickle of investors came in. Why? Because investors are a shrewd lot. They knew that as much as Mugabe was a tyrant, corrupt and incompetent, the 2017 military coup did not transform Zimbabwe in any way. What we had in 2017 was musical chairs. Zimbabwe remained a pariah state. And you do not expect investors to invest in a pariah state. So in this particular case, we should be looking at, before Mnangagwa can sign the mega deals on behalf of SADC, he should be able to sign small deals for Zimbabwe. But he cannot do so because Zimbabwe is riddled with corruption, gross mismanagement, and political paralysis. Our learned friend here, Professor Arthur Mutambara, was in the GNU of 2008 to 2013, when Zimbabwe was offered the golden opportunity to implement the democratic reforms and end the ZANU-PF dictatorship. Ask him, how many democratic reforms did you implement? He was deputy prime minister. 0. Not even 1. Mugabe bribed Professor Arthur Mutambara and his friends, and they failed to implement even 1 reform. And he himself has admitted as much. The text I'm showing at the bottom is quoting his own words, admitting that as the MDC leaders, they've taken their eyes off the GNU reforms. So he's admitting that even when he was given the golden opportunity to sort out Zimbabwe's village problems, 5 years to do so, he failed. And yet here he is, pretending that he can sort out the continent's problems. He cannot run a village and yet aspire to run the country. He could not run the country but now aspires to run the whole continent. As much as people would want to see the United States of Africa as economically successful as the United States of America or the European Union, the truth of the matter is, if the individual countries of Africa cannot run their affairs, they cannot run the individual countries, it really is nonsensical to talk of let's unite all those individual countries. Zimbabwe has failed to end the curse of rigged elections and gross mismanagement. For the last 45 years. It is laughable. Of course, it is laughable that we somehow think we can nonetheless form a United States of Africa when we can't even run free, fair, and credible elections. Ian Smith, the then Prime Minister of Rhodesia, in 1975 said that if blacks ruled themselves, the people will be walking on sewage until they think it's normal. Many of the things he said that year have come true. 45 years after independence, Zimbabweans are walking on sewage in urban centers. And the tragedy is the situation in the rural areas has not improved. Millions for people in the rural areas still use the bush toilet. I think one could ask for, why was Ian Smith's prediction so correct? One can offer many explanations for it. And yet one of them has to be that as blacks, we have got this tendency, we don't have the common sense to accept failure. Indeed, we don't seem to comprehend it. Here is an individual who has failed to run, as he would call it, the village, Zimbabwe. And yet he's so super confident that he can run the United States of Africa. That is our problem. We cannot be trusted with the 10 denarius. And yet we believe we should be trusted with even more, 100, 1,000 denarius. First, we've got to prove we can run our own separate countries before we can aspire to unite Africa and have the United States of Africa. Let's concentrate on the job at hand. Run our own individual countries. In the case of Zimbabwe, get off first base. Hold free, fair, and credible elections. Because that is our only hope of having competent and accountable leaders. If we can't hold free, fair, and credible elections, even being in SADC is becoming a real pain in the neck for the rest of our SADC nations. As we saw in Botswana, when the people there complained of ZANU-PF trying to interfere with the election process there. As we saw in Mozambique, as once again, the ZANU-PF interfered in the election process in that country. We are not fit to even be in SADC, much less have a buffoon like Mnangagwa as chairman of SADC. The idea that Mnangagwa can negotiate on behalf of SADC mega deals is laughable. Who would trust Mnangagwa? He can't be trusted to run Zimbabwe's affairs. Now all of a sudden we want to give him responsibility to run the whole of SADC's affairs. It's laughable. I think we need to grow up. People like Arthur Mutambara should have the humility to accept that even when they were given the chance to sort out Zimbabwe's teething problems, they failed to do so. They let the country down to now be preaching of a United States of Africa. It's laughable. Really laughable. Thank you. Have a good day.